It was no doubt a challenge most people wouldn't have been up for. But, and Kirishima could say he knew this more so than anyone else, Ashido was not most people. The triumphant smirk and gleam in her eyes as she bared her teeth was evidence of that. The entire group sat silent as her words hung in the air. I dare you to kiss Kirishima. Bakugou hadn't broken eye contact or so much as twitched in response. Finally, the rest of the students broke into laughter, some genuinely amused and some nervous. Kirishima watched her in awe. Eventually, a small smile began to spread. She obviously had that trump card in her pocket this whole time. He had to hand it to her. She knew exactly how to beat Bak. Fine. Kirishima went rigid in his seat. He sputtered at Bakugou's words. Ashido sat back, her smile only spreading as everyone else settled back into silence. All eyes on them as Bakugou turned in his seat to face him. Hey man, it's just a game. You don't have to. You think I'm losing? Red eyes were dangerously close to his own. But... Any further attempts at protest were stifled by Bakugou's lips against his own. His hands got caught between them, flat against the toned muscle that the soft cotton of his shirt did nothing to hide. It was a brief exchange, but by the time he pulled away, his head was swimming. Bakugou only wore a triumphant smirk as he turned back to Ashido. My turn. Bakugou was all gloating and smiles after the game concluded. He had ultimately won after Ashido was unable to chug a gallon of milk. Kirishima sat next to her, a hand on her back as she leaned over. That was so not cool, she breathed out. He felt bad for her, though he suspected she was more upset about losing than puking. That was amazing. Kaminari took a seat at the table with a bowl of cereal. Ashido covered her mouth and soon buried her head in the bucket at her feet. Sero sat on the other side of his girlfriend, staring in horror as Kaminari happily continued eating. Kirishima turned towards him so as not to get sick himself. Maybe we got a little carried away. Kaminari grinned around his spoon, but Sero spoke first. Well, one of us did, as usual. I'm definitely feeling some regret right now. Ashido lamented from her bucket. He worked on holding back her hair. Not you, Ash. You know how blasty can be. Kaminari swirled his spoon. He's just competitive. Is that what you call it? Sero raised his brow at him. Kaminari aimed his spoon at Kirishima. You think he's mad? No, why? Well, he certainly had his revenge. Sero braced Ashido as she sat back. I think I'm fine now. She turned her head to leer at Kirishima. What was it like? I'm guessing it was terrifying. Kaminari pushed his bowl away. Or mortifying. Sero grabbed the bowl and took it to the sink. Kirishima shifted in his seat. It's not a big deal. The words sounded slightly surreal as they left him. He had spent so many countless moments imagining scenarios like what had just happened. Well, not exactly like that, but any series of events that would somehow lead their lips together. It was always this big magical moment. Of course, he never dreamed it would become reality. You good, Ash? I think I'm going to call it a night. Ashido waved him off and he rose from his seat. After the events of the day, he was more than grateful for the prospect of it coming to an end. That peace of mind proved to be short-lived. As he unlocked his door, he caught movement next to him. He looked up to see Bakugou leaning against the wall. Hey, man. He merely grunted. What's up? Thought we were watching a movie. Shit. He had forgotten about asking him to watch it with him. Oh, yeah, I guess I forgot. He scratched at his head nervously. Bakugou rolled his eyes and slid past him into the room. Kirishima felt himself swallow. Shit. Once they settled on the bed and set up his laptop, Kirishima was hyper-aware of the body next to him. He preoccupied himself with the zipper of his hoodie. This was stupid. It was just a dare, and obviously Bakugou wasn't bothered by it, so he should just let it go. He could almost feel the heat from his lips again as he recalled the memory. A deep blush formed, and he was grateful for the lack of light. Just a dare. Just a kiss. It didn't mean anything, and there was no point in giving it a second thought. He just couldn't help but wonder what would have happened if it had just been the two of them there. Would he have kissed him longer? Would he have let him?
Ha! Fucking moron.
Bakugou's sudden amusement at the movie startled him from his train of thought, blush suddenly deeper. He internally cursed himself. He's right there. Stop. Of course, his traitorous brain couldn't help but to imagine him saying the exact opposite.
You okay?
Bakugou nudged him. He could feel his eyes as well. Yeah. He managed, but it didn't even convince himself. His face was burning, and he knew he couldn't look at his friend after imagining him like...
You're being all quiet.
Kirishima shook his head as if to physically clear the images. It's nothing.
Fuck you, tell me.
I said it's fine. Bakugou growled his annoyance, the bed jostling as he moved to fully look at him. Kirishima turned to further hide his face.
You're being weird.
I'm not. He knew he absolutely was. A heavy sigh, and before he knew it, Kirishima was pinned to his mattress and Bakugou was looming over him.
Talk.
He continued to shake his head. He couldn't talk. He could barely manage a thought.
It's because of earlier, right?
No. He wanted to scream. Yes, obviously. Now get off of me, please. After a moment of silence, he forced his eyes open.
So, what then?
I said it was nothing.
And that's obviously bullshit.
Whatever, just let me up. Kirishima tried to sit up, but the other man didn't relent. Frustration taking over his embarrassment, he continued to struggle until he was able to roll to the side, sending his computer to the floor and reversing their positions. Bakugou actually looked surprised. It wasn't a look he got to see very often, but it was definitely a favorite. It was just as endearing as seeing him intensely focused. As he was picturing him in the heat of such a moment, he failed to notice.
What are you doing?
The words once again broke him from the haze of his thoughts, and he reached reality with gut-clenching horror. There was barely room for air to get between them as Kirishima hovered just above his mouth. He immediately sat up, his blush returning and the gears in his head desperately trying to turn out a reasonable answer. Bakugou pushed him off and rose from the bed, not meeting his eye.
I'm going to bed,
he suddenly announced and made for the door. Hey, wait. I wasn't. That was just...
It's fine.
With that, he slid into the hallway and shut the door. Kirishima collapsed back on his bed with nothing else to do but feel his heart pounding painfully in his chest.